Hi, everybody. Welcome to our launch of Cocktails with Cruising World. It's going to be a weekly Wednesday series where we chat with friends and contributors of Cruising World from all around the globe. I'm here with Cruising World Executive Editor Herb McCormick, and we have Behan and Jamie Gifford, who we'll get to in just a minute. They're on their Stevens 47 out in the Sea of Cortez. Pretty nice place to be, I would imagine.
A little toasty.
Anyways, just to kind of get things going, if you're not familiar with using Zoom, there's a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So if you have something you'd like to ask these guys, type in your question. Herb's going to be kind of monitoring that on the side rail, and we'll get them over to you and work them into the conversation. This is going to be kind of a freewheeling affair, just kind of hit a lot of topics, and Herb and I will jump in, and Behan is a kind of a master at this, so she can steal the screen whenever she wants and show us cool pictures and whatever she wants to do. Just a word to we're really excited to have Mount Gay as our lead-off sponsor. They make a good rum. It goes well with orange juice, and who doesn't like the Mount Gay hat? We're awful glad to have them aboard. So let's kind of get things going. Behan, you're in the Sea of Cortez. Jamie, you guys kind of left the United States a whole long time ago and took a big lap around the planet. Kind of fill us in on how you got here.
Sure thing. So yeah, we took off in 2008 and we left from the Puget Sound area in Washington. We sailed south, decided
with
that
3 little kids.
Yeah, 3 little kids. They were 4, 6, and 9 at the time, which is crazy to think about because now instead of having little kids, we have these big ones, which is outrageous to consider. They were just, little cherubs when we left, but we took them around the world, and that was such an amazing thing to have the opportunity to do as a family. It took us a long time. We spent actually end-to-end crossing our track 8 years, and we've been out cruising now for 12 years, currently hanging out on the Pacific side of Mexico with our plans for the South Pacific a bit on hold thanks to COVID.
So I know in the feature you did for us recently, kind of introducing our readers to the Giffords, Jamie, you were pretty gung-ho to go, and Behan, you're kind of scared out of your wits.
We had our moments.
Yeah, I think that I'm a lifelong sailor. I had this dream for a long time, and you read Robin Lee Graham's Dove when you're 11 years old, and what else are you going to do with the rest of your life? Go cruising.
He gave me that book when we'd been dating for 2 weeks because I needed to understand him better.
It's important. It's a good screening tool. And
apparently I was being screened. Well, I was screening boyfriends for sailing.
How many?
We're not going to discuss that.
So, but Behan was a traveler and figured out that, well, you can travel on a sailboat too. That was her hook into this, and we made it work.
And so, sort of talk a little bit about the route and some of the, the high points of the voyage.
Oh wow! It's like when we get the question, "What's your favorite place?" It's so hard, right?
I wouldn't dare.
Yeah, that's a loaded one. But we when we set out, the plan was to go down to where it's warm, where the butter melts and all that. We went down to Mexico. We spent our first 18 months cruising in the Pacific side of Mexico, where we are now in this region, and it is terrific cruising ground. And we knew we wanted to go west across the Pacific because that's the dream spot. But we didn't think beyond that. We didn't set out with the idea we're going to circumnavigate because it's a pretty loaded topic, and it sets yourself up for a failure if you don't make it, or a failure if you get to Mexico and decide this place is awesome, I don't want to go anywhere else. So we thought we'll just see. But 2010, we went across the South Pacific. We did it in 1 season. It turns out the Pacific is really damn big, and especially when you're going 6 knots.
Yeah.
But it was a spectacular experience.
Yeah, well, and we had a La Nina year, so reinforced trade winds made it a little boisterous, but sped up some passages.
Yeah, anybody who thinks it's this passive, simple, easy weather ocean.
Pacific.
Yeah. Our average wind speed was 28 knots crossing that year. And often 3 directions of sea states. It was a lively year.
That was the bit I think I didn't count on, because when you experience swells going out of Puget Sound, coming down the US West Coast, they're spectacular and gentle and huge, but they're so, you've got so much time from peak to peak that it's not a big deal. And then in the Pacific, they were coming at us from all these different directions, and that was a new ball game.
Yeah.
That's heavy weather sailing. I'm wondering how your kids did with that. Were they on board with all that, or was that a real rough transition period? That's rugged sailing.
Yeah, so a good point. So they had the bow as well for their cabins.
The V berth,
the least comfortable part of the boat.
There are definitely times when they're up there shouting and cheering as water's going over the bow hatch. So they got into it. But there were also times when they didn't love the conditions we were having to go out in. But I think that was the important part there is we never pressed. We never went out in rough weather just to show them how tough we were. The boat was.
We assiduously avoided it.
It was a slow progression, and everyone building up their confidence in the boat, in our ability to make smart decisions. That when we would go on passage, I'd say to the kids, hey, this one's going to be a bit lumpy. This is what it's going to be like, but it's okay. It's not too bad. And they would trust that. I think when you try and fool your crew, even if they're really young, you get called out at some point.
I know you guys, I don't want to ask your favorite place, but there's a question that I always did want to ask you, which was, what was the most unexpectedly good place? Some place that maybe you didn't think was going to be someplace on your radar screen as being special that turned out to be kind of a really cool place?
That's such a good question. The one that we didn't expect to be so cool.
For me, Papua New Guinea, I expected it to be unusual, but the wow factor is, it's really indescribable. You're in a time machine. You're with people that live in a way that's 1,000 years old. And if they didn't make it, catch it or grow it, they don't have it. And so we were Costco. We were the trading ship coming in. Every day was about commerce and human interaction with people, and it was unimaginably good.
Yeah, and in a similar way, my favorite in that regard would be Madagascar. I actually had really high expectations in a way for Papua New Guinea. We went because I pushed for it. I really wanted to go. So, and it lived up to every one of them, like Jamie was saying. It was an incredible place. I was a little more apprehensive about Madagascar as a place we'd heard some sort of mixed reports on, and then absolutely fell in love with it for many of the same reasons, that life was a lot more basic, pared down to essentials, and really a very beautiful place to experience.
Is crossing the Indian Ocean as ominous and kind of rugged as I've heard? Or what were your experiences crossing the Indian?
So
technical.
Yeah, as much as though the Pacific gets the reputation as being the easy ocean because of the weather, and it's not. The Indian Ocean has the reputation for being the really tough one because of the weather, and largely it's not. I think that we benefit so much by having good weather forecasting. If you can read the tea leaves and make the most of that, it's not, it can be really a manageable ocean. In our experience, the Bay of Bengal from Thailand to Sri Lanka, we had approximately 0.0 knots of wind for most of that.
Give or take.
So no issue there, lake-like conditions. The big challenge was
we motored in VHF
water
range, like visual distance of friends of ours, and played games over the radio.
But water spouts a few times, like really big. We've seen water spouts before, but not like this. These ones were monsters and really intimidating. But we got through all that. The Western Indian Ocean was a different deal.
And it was really so we came all the way down Maldives to Chagos, and you're kind of smack in the middle from Chagos. It was mostly going west from Chagos. And that's where things started to get a little bit trickier, and mainly really technical in terms of being able to access and interpret data. One of the boats, for example, going from Madagascar to South Africa was reading the current tables backwards. And the Madagascar, or Indian Ocean is just not a place to start. if you're a relatively new cruiser. It's good to have your skills down first. And another boat going from Chagos to the Seychelles had a passage about 3 times as long as ours, which was what, 5 days, I think?
7 days.
7 days. By not paying attention to current and really focusing very much on wind, which was important, but the current was a really significant factor there. And depending on just kind of where you got with the counter current, you either were fighting it or you had it helping you get there. It was a big difference.
Yeah, and the real
They ran out of
challenge,
fuel.
the real challenge in that western half is the stretch across to South Africa. If you're in Madagascar, the Mozambique Channel is really complicated sailing. You've got up to 6 knots of the Agulhas current going south. You've got conditions out of the Southern Ocean. You get stuff across Southern Africa that blows down, and then enhanced trade winds that come across. So there's a lot of dynamics.
But the one that I think is super relevant for East Coast sailors is the Agulhas current, because kind of like the Gulf Stream, we tend to look at these or talk about these currents as monolithic kind of, you know, singular events, and they're just not. They're so complicated with meanders and filaments, and it's being able to work with those that helps you be most comfortable and safer. We played that one really well with the Agulhas going into South Africa. We totally blew it with the Gulf Stream and had a really uncomfortable passage. Yeah, you win some, you lose some.
True.
So it almost,
A few of us have seen that movie before. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
it almost seems like sailing is like the easiest thing to learn about this whole long distance sailing stuff. I mean, what are the skill sets that you really should be working on if you're thinking about taking off, you think?
Weather.
Weather's pretty good, I hear. Celestial, oh no. No,
Yeah,
you don't really
no.
need that one. I think it's funny, Celestial's wonderful. I learned it like 100 years ago and never used it, so it.
We use our sextant to look at solar eclipse events.
Yeah,
mainly.
It's nice, but I find that a lot of people come out and they don't understand boat systems. They don't understand sails at all. It turns out if you're going to be on a sailboat, you might as well learn a little bit about sails.
He is a sailmaker, so bias maybe.
And rigging and things like that.
And a rigger.
Are really pretty important. Yeah. And I would like to see more people get back to those fundamentals. There's also a lot about researching countries and destinations you're going to. What are the risks before you get there? What are the hazards of being there, both from a mariner point of view and a traveler in a foreign place point of view?
I want to underscore one of the first things that Jamie talked about, though, which is the systems on the boat. It's so easy in our comfortable lives before we leave to outsource so much of the things that we rely on for our comfort. And when you're on a boat and you have to manage every utility, and the plumbing's not working and the electricity is not working and you've got to get in there, and sometimes they're just gross, but sometimes they're really dangerous. These are things that are a lot to take on when you're brand new to cruising.
Yeah, and it's not to say that you need to be MacGyver when you set off. You don't. What you need to be is willing to learn and open-mindedness, willing to roll your sleeves up and dig in and do stuff. And the cruising community is so awesome because we all help each other. You don't have the right tools, somebody down, the next boat over is going to have that tool, and they'll help you use it. So
or that spare.
There's a lot to that, but when you see boats that always rely on somebody else, never really get involved, they struggle sometimes.
Hey, Jamie, about sails, I know you are a sailmaker, and I'm just wondering, what are the biggest mistakes cruising sailors make with sails? Are they sailing with old sails, or the wrong sails, or not the proper maintenance of sails? What do cruisers do wrong with sails?
So the number one thing for any tropical or subtropical sailors, cruisers, is UV as the thing that kills it. By far and away, UV damage. And so a common mistake is, I'm going to go cruising. I just bought these brand new sails from a really reputable loft. They're tough offshore sails. And 3 and 4 years later, they go to pull the sail down in a reef and they tear it in half, and it's like tissue paper, and it's UV damaged. And oftentimes there's some subtleties in the decisions and how the sail was made in the cloth that are the wrong choices. That make the sail fail more easily. And then sometimes it's just forgetting. At the end of the day, we're all imperfect about covering the sail after the trip. but it really does take the life out of the sail. Zip up the boom cover, you know, get that thing out of the sun.
You guys are back in Mexico, kind of where you started your circumnavigation 8 years ago, and I'm kind of curious, just to bring us up to date, what is the situation there with regard to COVID? How is that affecting cruisers' plans, and including your own?
So the situation here is actually that it's been easier for us, I think, in many ways than a lot of other countries. Mexico never closed the border. It's complicated to come overland, but you can still sail in and out. And almost every port remained open to clear in and out of. There have been a lot of restrictions on our movement. I didn't leave the boat for over 6 weeks at one point, and the rest of our family, I think, was over the 5-week mark. And at the place where we are currently located, the beaches are still closed. Only one person is supposed to go ashore at a time, and for relatively essential activities. Literally just Monday, day before yesterday, they allowed a few facilities to begin opening that are non-essential at lower capacity. But it's really changed the way we experience Mexico, of course. While at the same time, we're able to enjoy it. We're able to, I want to share a little picture here. We're able to hang out in a place like this where obviously social distancing here is not a problem. We're in some beautiful anchorages in the Sea of Cortez where we're able to not go ashore officially and not recreationally boating, but I'm pretty happy sitting on my boat looking at this view.
I think one of the challenges that's happening now is that hurricane season has officially started on the Pacific side some weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And the real risk up here isn't until August and September, but it's also really hot. A lot of people bail out of cruising Sea of Cortez and Pacific side Mexico in the summer because the heat is so oppressive. And so these two limiting factors, coupled with the fact that a lot of boatyards are shut down. So people that would normally go into a boatyard, pull it, go home for the summer, come back later, the boatyards are not an option right now in a lot of places. And so there's a bit of stress around that, managing, do I just stay here? I'm worried about hurricanes. Do I sail to Hawaii or bash up the coast? And so it's made it a bit of a tough decision for some people.
It has. We've had to renew visas, which in some places has also been complicated. But I went into the immigration office today. It's actually the first time I'd been in town, like in a community, since March 20th, I think. And it kind of freaked me out a little, I'll be honest. But the immigration folks in Mexico have decided that it's a humanitarian reason to extend visas, and our daughter's visas, which expired this week, were extended as if they had just entered the country. They've got brand new 6-month tourist cards for exactly what we would have paid on arrival. That's pretty cool of Mexico to be that friendly to us as sort of stuck cruisers.
So are your plans right now to sort of be, hanging in Mexico? And we also have a question from a viewer, which is what destinations are still on your bucket list? So maybe you can answer kind of a 2-part question. What are the immediate plans and what are the longer term plans?
I think the immediate plan is we're up in the Sea of Cortez for the summer. We will watch hurricanes. They tend to form off of El Salvador and southern Mexico. And so if one does begin to spin up and head this way, we have plenty of time to go to the northern part of the sea where Baja and the land takes a lot of the punch out. And they typically only reach up there as a remnant or a tropical depression. So something bubbles up, we'll go up that way. And otherwise enjoy the stunning beauty that's in the Sea of Cortez.
Mm-hmm. The other question, then where do we go after that though? It's an interesting one. And one of the ways I want to couch that is by sharing this picture of the track of our circumnavigation. And what I see when I look at this is not that we went around the world and went to, 48 countries and territories, I think we counted. I see that there's this little line and there's so much that we haven't seen. There's so much more to go out and experience and explore. And there are definitely places we want to revisit, but there's so much to meander from and see otherwise. But bucket list wise, really different. I would love to go through Chilean forts, and I would love to go to Japan, and I would love to go to Norway. And what do these three things have in common that I don't like?
Yeah, a bit of chili drinks.
They're cold.
Yeah.
I don't know how we're going to bridge that yet, but I'm game to try.
But right now we were going to the South Pacific this year. That got shut down. We're hopeful that we can get out into the Pacific again next year, although the South Pacific is looking restricted in an ongoing way. And so we're actually have a lot of interest right now in crossing the North Pacific. Kiribati, Marshalls, Micronesia, Solomons, and maybe back to PNG sound pretty exciting.
It'd be pretty challenging, and I think we like a challenge.
So,
Here's kind of a question that just came in, being it's maybe it's kind of a systems question, but by your bucket list places in the high latitudes, it might answer the question as well. But it's a simple question: how do you keep the boat cool?
So
there are a few different ways to do it.
Outside right now, Totem side decks are about 152 degrees.
Ooh.
They're warm. And of course that radiates down below. We have added insulation in the past, real thin closed cell foam, and it's got a foil sheet on it, so it blocks that radiation type thermal transfer, and that's helped some. We have fans, and we move slowly in the middle of the day. We're pretty sloth-like.
Keeping shade on deck is key. If you can keep the sun off the deck, it keeps things so much cooler below. When we have areas of the deck that aren't shaded, so I was cleaning in the part of the boat yesterday where the sun was directly on the deck, and I could just feel, you know, the heat when I pulled a sponge away, the heat that was coming through like that right into the headliner, right down in my hand. It's surprising.
I think our real therapy to surviving this, though, is at the end of the day when the sun is starting to angle down and the light gets a little softer, is we grab pool noodles and we go in the water for float downers. So the paddleboard becomes a bar, and there's nothing like an hour and a half of floating in the water and bring the body core temperature down.
That's right.
It's very nice.
Yeah, the water temperature right now, 84 degrees. So it's really just right to cool off when you get in, and be great to just hang out. Best use of a pool noodle.
You are killing us New Englanders, I'll tell you.
Hey, I'm a New Englander. That's a choice.
No, you're New Englander.
New Englander.
Hey, Behan, a lot of people here in the States got a rude awakening when kids got sent home and parents became the teachers. One of the great things I saw posted somewhere was, parents are discovering it wasn't the teachers that was the problem. You know, you guys spent 8 years homeschooling and did a good job. I mean, you got kids in college. You know, any tips for parents that are kind of sitting at home, or parents that are thinking about taking off and schooling their kids, you know, maybe lesson sources and strategies?
I think the best advice is the best advice that I got when we were getting started, because I'm worried about homeschooling more than anything, more than the things I was supposed to worry about, the storms and the pirates and all of that. I worried about homeschooling because education in our society is everything, or at least that's what we're taught to believe. I'm not so sure now, but I felt that it was so important to make sure our kids had a good education. I had no idea that we would be equipped to do that. And a friend of mine who is a more experienced cruising mom sat me down on the beach and basically told me to chill out, that by being a concerned parent, by paying attention, by ensuring fundamentals and being open for learning opportunities, it was going to work out. And I needed to not worry about it so much and not push it so hard. And she was absolutely right. One of the things we learned over time is that there's no one right way to homeschool. I was still trying to find the right way to do it, and there isn't one. There's a different one for every family because people learn differently, they go to different places, and they have different tools and resources, and you can still have a great education however those get blended up.
I think we have one real advantage being out on the boat is that we can bring in what's around us into education and turning into a learning experience that's really meaningful. And that's tough to do when you're stuck at home that you've been in for a long time. So it's a bit tough, but letting education, I think, kind of freewheel out a little bit. Don't stick to force feeding this book. If it's not going well that day, push the book aside, do something else. Education comes in so many forms.
You know, I think you guys covered this a little bit in your recent feature for us in May, but it's always the question every cruiser, hopeful cruiser has. And so another question that's come in from one of our viewers is, how much did you budget for your travels, and have costs exceeded what you expected?
Yeah. So we didn't really budget for them per se. We kind of saved as much as we could. And then we planned on selling our house. And then we thought, well, that'll be enough for 2 to 5 years. So we didn't really have a specific budget. And then what happened was we weren't able to sell our house, because it turns out 2008 was a terrible year to sell your house. So we were saddled with that. We had less savings, and we were spending more of it to support a house. We stretched it out for 2.5 years, almost 3 years. And by just minimizing, frankly. How that's evolved over time is that we've realized that we tend to spend about the same amount every year, despite fluctuations in dynamics. Like one year might be relatively expensive in terms of travel, like in South Africa, where we splurged on doing some safari travel. And another year might be really expensive based upon hauling out. And yet we'll go years without hauling out and doing significant work that we're paying out for. And so it's almost like, you know, like air expands to hold, or gases expand to fill the space that they're given. I kind of feel like in general, cruisers tend to spend to a level that meets their comfort levels. And that's what we've done.
And well, how much do we spend?
We spend really consistently, everybody wants to know the numbers, right? $35,000 a year. We've been doing that for years. And one of the things we do with coaching clients
we haven't adjusted for inflation, so I don't know.
No, it's true, we haven't. But we give coaching clients a spreadsheet with like all of our spend to be able to go through and make it real, because although it's only ours, it doesn't mean what their habits are going to be and what they're going to spend. It helps make it concrete, right? This year was the one with all of the travel. This year was hauling out. And, you know, this year was Jamie's skin cancer, derm surgeries.
Yeah, one of the hard things about finances is that getting the right boat, not spending too much on the boat, then being unable to refit it because you spent too much on the boat, getting that balance right. And then when you get going and you've worked and now you're living off of savings or a small residual income or whatever, that risk tolerance for finances changes, and it can be stressful for some people. So kind of making friends with that different risk tolerance is part of it. And for the people that make it through all of that and the other challenges of early transition to cruising, what we find is money is for people that want to keep going cruising, and money is often the thing that limits it, and they have to go back. And when we got to Australia, we literally got there with $100 liquid in the bank. That's all we had. We were flat broke. Behan was able to get a job there. It's really hard to do that in Australia, but a legal job with work visa and all that.
Right, needing official permission. So getting a work visa meant the company had to apply and hire a lawyer and pay fees and do all this stuff in order to hire me.
And then what happened is it was working in the same old job that she did before in Seattle. And it was great because it like resupplied our account somewhat, but it was horrible because she realized that
I didn't fit in anymore.
Didn't want to have one foot in the business world and one in the boat world. And so then it was for us having to reinvent ourselves to figure out how to make some amount of income to stay cruising. When you're cruising, like $35,000 a year works for us. It could be $20,000 a year or whatever you have. You can scale to that as long as you're realistic about what that amount of money does for you.
I know you guys have done a lot of coaching with people who are prospective cruisers, and I'm wondering if you're getting with this whole coronavirus matter that's on everybody's minds all the time. If you're getting kind of different questions, or if you're getting people who are changing plans or perspectives or outlooks, I'm wondering what kind of feedback you're getting from the community.
Yeah, so it's been a mix. First, there was the March and early April where everyone just kind of went, whoa, what's going on? And then starting around mid-April, there was, all right, plan B. And for the folks we work with that are in the Caribbean, because we work with people after they've left as well, it was, okay, we need to make a plan before hurricane season, and we need help getting there. So that was actually a really busy few weeks.
Yeah, we thought it would really drop off, and it's like, okay, there's our income dried up. Now what are we going to do? You know, we'll say sell tortillas in Mexico, but it turns out, I think there was maybe a reality or a slap in the face, and people said, you know, I've always wanted to do this thing. I've talked about it, and now this reality back in mainstream is like, there's no guarantee of anything. Why don't I do this thing? So we've been busier than ever, and the brokers that we work with the people we coach are saying it's like
they're slammed,
booming with business right now. So
and perhaps the other shoe will drop at some point. But right now, truly, it seems that it has prompted people to make a change, and I feel like that's actually not that different than what happened to us. We lost Jamie's mom in her 50s, and that was a real wake-up call that we needed to not postpone this cruising dream we had until we retired. We might not get there.
One of the realities now with the questions that are coming at us, it's like, okay, how do we do this? And some people say, well, I basically want to flee and get away from this stuff. But we say, okay, well, there's some problems here because you can't just bounce around the Caribbean right now. There's restriction. So it's level setting what you can and can't do. What are the trends that are happening? What does the outlook look like? And then it's like, okay, we can build a plan around that. And then with people that are out, it's that hurricane thing and restricted access. So there are a bunch of boats that went back with the Salty Dog Rally from the Caribbean, which is awesome that they stepped up and helped people get back. Mm-hmm. But it has curtailed a lot of plans. It's changed plans, but cruising is still happening.
Ian, in your blog posts at cruisingworld.com and at your own site, which is, go ahead, give it a plug.
sailingtotem.com. Thanks.
Early on in this whole thing, you guys were about to jump off across the Pacific. The hordes had amassed in Mexico from the Baja and the migration, and everybody was getting ready to go. And it seemed like some people just said, I'm a cruiser, I'm going. And then other people like you guys took what I consider to be a bit more responsible, realistic approach. Have you heard from people that went regrets?
We've heard some interesting stories. It was deeply distressing to me that people would go to countries that were closed and saying effectively, we don't want you. And so I have been following to try to understand the path. And what's happened in some cases is we're not hearing a lot back, actually. And I think that is partly a product of the fact that cruisers like to talk about things when they go really well. And if it's not really going so awesome, there's not a lot to talk about. What we have seen is boats that left knowing that they were headed for a closed country show up briefly in the South Pacific, and then some period later they're suddenly in Hawaii. So I guess it didn't go so well for them. It's something I think we'll still continue to learn more about. I do hope that as things continue to evolve and countries relax restrictions and then tighten them again, that cruisers will first and foremost hold respect for the will of the country they wish to go to rather than their own personal desires. There's this kind of free spirit approach or mentality with cruising, and I think it's wonderful, it's great, and we can live that in many ways very fully. But at the end of the day, when you're showing up a country, you're still the guest in that country, and you need to follow the rules. And it was tough in the early part because it was uncertain what the restrictions were. We were unclear about what was going on. Some people left before there was restrictions in place, and they showed up and got shut down. And so it was stressful for people. It was really hard. And I felt terrible for the folks that left. Really, when it seemed all right. None of us really knew it was going to happen yet. And we have actually tracked with some of those boats then that did divert. Some that diverted and went to Hawaii. Others arrived in the Marquesas, waited out some quarantine, reprovisioned, and then headed up to Hawaii. And the good news is that at least for those boats heading north, it was a great time of year to go from the South Pacific to Hawaii. So there were generally some pretty sweet passages that happened. And then Hawaii was actually quite welcoming. It's a difficult place to be a cruiser. It's actually very expensive to have a cruising permit in Hawaii. an anchoring permit, and there were some mixed quarantine restrictions, but at the end of the day, a good place for them, probably better than being locked down in the Marquesas.
Pretty cool. So our time has kind of flown by here. We kind of said a half hour or over quite a bit. So I guess we'll kind of have to wrap up. I would like to remind people that this is sort of an ongoing series. Next Wednesday at this time, we'll have Wendy Midman-Clark on the hot seat. She was a longtime Cruising World columnist, and she and her family took off and went all up and down the eastern seaboard and through the Caribbean. And the week after that, we have Captain Fatty Goodlander. He's been, I don't know, Herb, how long has he been with Cruising World?
I think Fatty's been doing a regular column now for 20 years. So
Incredible.
yeah, we've just got a question that will these interviews be posted online, Mark? And I'm wondering, I know you can answer that question.
Well, we hope they will be. Yeah. We'll give us a couple days. We're kind of still working out the kinks here, but we'll get them up. We have a part of the cruisingworld.com is called the Cruising World Rendezvous, and we have a lot of kind of content that we've been producing the last couple months as we're kind of all going through this thing together. And so we'll have this session up there, and people are welcome to go back and see it. Hopefully, Jamie and Behan, we can get you back on board here another time, and we could probably talk to you for hours or days here and still have fun.
They'd love to come back.
It's always fun to hang out with you guys. Definitely going to be back next week for Wendy Midman-Clark. I love the lens that she looks at the sailing and cruising experiences through, and Fatty Goodlander, because man, he can spin a tale, and I just love Carolyn.
And Carolyn's awesome.
When she can get a word in edgewise.
Yeah.
You guys, if there are fall shows, you have to show up in the States?
Yeah, actually, at this point, we are committed to come to Annapolis for Cruisers University, and we'll see how things unfold. It's sort of hard to imagine how everything can be handled with risk management, but we'll just, trust that if it's possible, that it'll be done right. And we always love the fall show in Annapolis, so I kind of hope it does, but we'll see.
Any other last words for the cruisers out there?
Don't wait.
Go cruising.
Make plans. Go. Set a date. Set a date. That's the thing.
Put it on your refrigerator. Make it part of your life. You'll actually go.
And we can help.
All right. Well, we'll hopefully see you in Annapolis for a real cocktail with Cruising World. Thank you so much, you guys. Everybody else.
Our pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.